One of the greatest challenges in the modern world, and this is not to do with Muslims but also across the board, is we're all monotonous. We all think the same, we all have the same worldviews, we're not open to being challenged, we're not open to thinking differently, we see the problems in the same way. That's not the solution. What we need is people who can think differently, people who can think outside the box, just like Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam did. What did he do when he came to Medina? Masjid, then marketplace. Can you see? He's thinking differently already. He's teaching you this. If you read a lot, what happens is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I believe, and this is not a scientific explanation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens your mind up to different vistas. When you read, it's like you're on a journey. It's like Allah opens your mind up to different perspectives which you didn't think of perhaps before. So why should you read? I'm going to give you a few reasons and hopefully try and empower every single one of you to get books and start reading. And inshallah, maybe in a future bayan I can talk about how to read books, because there's a technique about reading books. Not every book has to be read front to cover, right? There's a technique to reading books as well. So the first reason, and I'll list them for you inshallah ta'ala, is that when you read, you gain invaluable insights into things that you won't get on TikTok, or you won't get on, Instagram. All these other things, even I can't keep up sometimes. It's just like every other week there's something new coming out, right? 1 minute, 30 seconds, how short is it now? 30 seconds? Right, and what it actually dumbs you down, because you're just gouging on like short bits of information. It doesn't actually make you a better person. When you read books, what it does is whatever book you read, it opens your mind up to different perspectives. Whether it's books you disagree with, whether it's written by non-Muslim, whoever. So Roald Dahl is an example I'm going to pick on today. Anyone read, not watched, anyone read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? You've read it? There's no shudder in it. What's the story telling you? It's a classic, it's a British classic, English classic. What does it teach you? What does the book teach you? This shows that you've read, and there's a difference between reading and reading here. There's deep reading and normal reading. G? Honesty. How did you learn that, if I may ask?
Right at the end.
Right at the end. And what about the characters? I'm leading you guys. There's characters in there. What are those characters embodying? What are they showing?
Greed and nature.
Bad things, right? Yeah, greed. Those characters, I hope you've read the book like this. You'll have to read it again now. Read it again if you haven't read it like this. I've read it with my daughter. When you're reading that book, he's showing you bad character. What we call radha'il. You know, in Tasawwuf, we have these bad character traits, right? You're supposed to get rid of greed, and all this other stuff. Selfishness. That book is teaching you the evil consequences of those things. Did you ever read a book that way? Yeah? Excellent. That's how you read a book. It's teaching you morality. It's teaching you akhlaq. But it's a non-Muslim teaching you that, but you learn that from that book. So that's what happens when you read a book properly. You start getting insights into things that you never got insights into before. All right? That's just an example. You can read a book on history. You can read a book on philosophy. Of course, there's a method to reading them. But what happens is it opens up your mind to different ways of thinking. One of the greatest challenges in the modern world, and this is not to do with Muslims but also across the board, is we're all monotonous. We all think the same. We all have the same worldviews. We're not open to being challenged. We're not open to thinking differently. We see the problems in the same way. That's not the solution. What we need is people who can think differently, people who can think outside the box, just like Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam did. What did he do when he came to Medina? Masjid, then marketplace. Can you see? He's thinking differently already. He's teaching you this. I'm just giving you these examples. The second one is that when you read books, it exercises your brain. Doesn't mean your muscles grow, your brain grows bigger. But what it does is that it connects your brain to different ways of thinking. When you start really pushing yourself, and I can imagine most of you, when you first start reading something, you'll be like, Maulana, but I only read a page myself and my head was hurting. Isn't that true to a lot of people? I've met people like this. I give them a book to test them. I say, look, but read this book. And they say, Maulana, I read the first page and my head was hurting. I read a chapter. It took me like 2 months to read a chapter and it was hurting. That's what happens when you start reading, because your brain has become so redundant that it struggles to read. Reading is part of our tradition. It's in the Quran, recitation, Iqra. The first thing that was said to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was what? Iqra, recite. We were a reading community. So this is the second thing that it does. And there's a lot of research that shows that it stimulates complex circuits in your brain. This is the science behind it all as well. And I think it's true as well. Like when you start reading a lot, eventually what happens is, it's like going to the gym. I don't go to the gym, but I used to when I was younger. And you know, when you lift the weights, it hurts, man. It's like you can't even lift it. 2 kgs, was it? 2 kgs, and then you go, like, you're just like, you hope nobody sees you, like, Joyle said, like, Maulana can't even lift 2 kgs, look at him, look how weak he is. He's really strong in the masjid when he stands and talks to us, but in the gym, he's weak. But what happens is, you do 2, then what happens? 4, and then what happens afterwards? Your body starts getting hungry, naturally, right? Your body wants it more and more, then you start lifting more and more and more. Why? The same thing happens with your brain. You start pushing it, and your brain's like, I want more, I want more, I want more. And then you just devour books, literally. That's when you know you're coasting. The third thing is that a lot of people struggle today with focus. So you might be listening to me right now, but your mind is like somewhere else. Your mind is focused on some other thing. When you read, it forces you to focus. Why? You're not on your screen. You're not like, nowadays everybody's doing this. Next clip, next clip, next clip, next clip. We're all guilty of it, right? What reading does, it forces you to read passages. If you don't understand something, you have to go back to it. It increases your focus. You're able to focus on the task at hand. That's one of the biggest challenges of the modern mind, which is that they can't focus anymore. People can't listen. People can't pay attention. That's why I have to keep this 45 minutes. Anything longer, you'll all walk out. Right? So I've got to keep it focused. Next thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is memory. So a lot of people have struggled with their memory. Yeah, not to do. I can't remember things. The more you read, the more sharper your intellect becomes, and the more your memory increases. You're able to memorize things. You're able to remember data. There's books that have been written. I read some books many, many years ago, Maulana, this fiqh, written on Greek mythology, not for you to read. And there was a book that was this fiqh, and it was basically how in pre-modern world, so we're talking like before, long time ago, people would have techniques about remembering data, lots of information. Now we don't need to because everything's there on our phone. So how did people in the past remember so much information? And one of the techniques they had was they used to imagine a house with all these rooms, and they used to put objects in these rooms, in their minds. And they used to use those objects as ways to remember things. That's how sophisticated our past was. People used to remember things. But now we don't. One other reason why we don't remember things, a more practical reason, is that when Maulana Haroon finishes talking, I can go home on YouTube and just log on again, and if I've missed something, I can listen to it again. Am I right? If you wanted to listen to me again, that is. But what would happen in the past? You left this room, opportunity is gone. If you don't listen to me, you don't hear me, it's gone. So by nature, you are forced to pay attention. Like in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when they heard hadith, the Prophet was not going to repeat it time and time and again for you. So people had really strong memories. They had to remember exactly what was said. They had to have that memory. Our grandparents had that. But now you miss something, you can go back on YouTube, or you have an audio file and you can go back. It weakens your memory. What you're supposed to do is try and remember what's being said. I say this to my daughters quite a lot. I say, look, when I say to you something, try and remember what I've said. Right? Pay attention. Because people don't pay attention anymore. So it improves your memory. Number 5 is really important. And I'm going to share this with you because when you read books, and especially the way I do, I read all sorts of books. You see human beings in all sorts of ways, complicated ways. Whether you read about someone who did something bad, someone that was successful, someone that had a painful life. What happens when you read their lives, you read their struggles, you have empathy for them. Like, Bichara, look, he was so successful, but look how much trouble he went through. Oh, he tried all of this, but in the end, he died as a martyr. So what happens is you see human beings as complex beings. We are complex beings, and we have to make decisions in complex situations. So what happens when you read books is that it creates empathy. You know what empathy means, right? Sympathy, empathy, like you feel for people's struggles. Instead of like just pushing them away, you get to sense that when this brother comes to me and he says, Maulana, I've got this problem. You're like, oh, I read this book and they had a similar problem, and I can maybe use that as a way of helping this brother out. Can you see? So this is why it's really, really important to read as much as you can. The Seerah, the Prophet ﷺ is the best example. If you read the Seerah, read it as a human being. Read it as through his struggles. Read Maulana Idris Kandilwi's the translation on that, or whatever is easy for you. And when you read it, don't just read it as data, like information. Unfortunately, in our madrasa system, sometimes we do this as well, where we just tell children to memorize things. Yad kallo, right? A more productive way is to think about it. Think about the stories. What does it teach you? What's actually going on, right? So when I sit with my daughters, and I'm doing Hanafi fiqh with my 5-year-old, I don't tell her the list. I don't tell her like this is how many fara'is there are in salah, or this is how many fara'is. I don't teach it that way. I just say, look, I sit down with them and I say the fara'is happened because of this, and it's in the Quran, and this is how it works. And I just have a conversation with them. I literally have a conversation with them, and I'm like, do you know what farz means? Do you know what sunnah means? Of course, not all of you can do that, right? But you teach your children in that way. You actually have conversations with them. And you realize they actually remember it much better because you've had a conversation with them. You've discussed things with them. And that obviously takes more time because in madrasas we don't always have time. But as parents, you can do that at home. But the ability to empathize is very, very important. I mean, you read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and Muslims and non-Muslims, and you read their autobiographies, you realize that they were human beings at the end of the day. They made mistakes. They made errors, and you can learn from that. Number 6 is very, very important, something that we as Muslims should be the masters of in, which is that the more you read, your communication skills improve. You're able to communicate better. This is what the prophets were masters at. The prophets were able to communicate with people, connect with people, right? How to use the right verbs, right nouns. Khadija, right adjectives, right? So using the right adjectives, she's doing adjectives with me at the moment. She uses, the kids use the simple ones like, this is a nice house, I'm happy. Well, how do you add more adjectives to it? Right? This is like skills. This is skills that we should teach our children. So it improves your communication skills. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the master in this. Right? He was succinct. He made his point. That's it. He made his point and that's it. And great orators, great speakers had this. This is called rhetoric. In a Greek tradition, we call this rhetoric. In Islam, we call it balagha. So we have this rhetoric. The Quran is like the masterpiece when it comes to speech, when it comes to articulating what you need to do. So I think these are important skills that you might want to think about when you're getting into reading books. The final one, I think, especially in our day and age, I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop, inshallah, is that reading reduces stress. The amount of people that reach out to say, Maulana, I'm stressed, I've got anxieties, I'm on Twitter every day, and it sucks me in, and I end up just having debates with people and arguing with people who are not going to be convinced. They've made their mind up about this, and you can bring every rational, logical argument, वो मानने के लिए तैयार ही नहीं है. They're not going to accept. And after a few times, you realize that some people are just not worth engaging with. They've made their mind up. فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً. Allah says they're like rocks. Don't waste your time with them. Rasul never wasted his time with people who just weren't open to conversation. People who are open to conversation, Rasul entertained them. Right? You have to have an open mind. So going back to my point, which is that reading helps in many ways to help you de-stress. But it comes with a condition. You can't have this guy with you. If you have this guy with you and you're reading Quran, Hadith, or any other book, you're going to get distracted. So I have an usul. When I'm reading, and Muhammad knows this because he rings me sometimes and I don't answer and I don't get back to him for 2-3 hours, it's usually, Maulana might know this as well sometimes, right? This is my excuse, Maulana. But what I'm saying is that you have to shut out those things. You have to shut off Twitter or X now or Facebook. These things are designed. They are designed with their algorithms to suck you in. And you will spend hours and hours on YouTube, hours and hours on Twitter, and you will have done nothing productive for 2 hours. I've met people like this time and time again. Just switch off. And if it's becoming too much of a distraction for you, my advice for you is log off. The world's going to carry on without you. Wallahi, the world's going to carry on without you. Do more productive things. Read a book. Read something. And reading for me is the ultimate relaxation. I say to my wife, and she jokes with me, she's not here, so she doesn't know what I'm saying. My wife says to me, you're such low maintenance. What did she say to me? She goes, low maintenance. She says, you're low maintenance. I'm like, why? She says, you don't go out, you don't socialize. Muhammad, am I right? I don't party, I don't do any of these things. She says, you just sit at home and you just read a book all day and you write. She says, I know what you do. And then she says, and then I said, you know what? All I need is a good book and a cup of tea. Chai and biscuit and a book and a cup of coffee. So Allah bless her. What did she do? When I said that to her, Muhammad knows this, she went to Trafford Center and bought me like the best coffee machine. Allah bless her. Allah bless her. I made dua for her that day because she knew that I'd spend hours and hours making coffee and I'm trying to get it all right. And she's like, just buy a machine, just put it in. And Muhammad knows he's sitting at my house. Apparently it's a good brand as well. I just like, coffee chahiye, bas. I want coffee. But she's like, no, you stay at home. So sometimes Allah blesses you with these things as well. So there's a hint for you that, a library, a good book, good company. You don't need anything else. But of course, remember that you have to be your social. So you're also part of society as well. I want to end with a few things and then we'll end that because I'm watching the time and I'm going to honor my time, which is 45 minutes. No longer than 45 minutes, inshallah ta'ala. Muhammad, Taha, know that I'm a bit of I'm quite strict with my timing. Book club. Why is a book club important? Well, it's an opportunity for you to meet like-minded people, to discuss things. And no one person will read the same chapter and come with the same answers. They come with different views on it. So you get to hear what somebody else is thinking. Because when you read a book, remember this, when you read a book, say this one, this is one of the books. When you read a chapter from this book, you're reading the same text. You're reading the same thing, right? You're reading the same book. But because when you're reading the book, you're bringing your life with it. You're bringing your experiences into it. So that intermingles, it's magical. That intermingles with the story. It's like when you read the Quran. When you read the Quran, have you ever felt, yeah, this ayat is talking about me? Not happened to you? It has to happen to you. When Yusuf alayhi salam is in the well, and he's like, nobody's here for me. And you're like, oh, this is my moment right now. When Yusuf alayhi salam becomes the leader, you're like, oh, this is my moment right now as well. You find this in the Quran. You find yourself in the Quran. Why? You're bringing your, what we call in science, subjectivities. You're bringing yourself in the Quran. This is what we call, you have tafsir, which is what you take from the Quran, and you have, that's called exegesis, but you also have eigesis, which is that you, when you read something, you bring something into it. Just like when you're listening to me now. When you're listening to me now, I'm saying the exact same thing to all of you. Sahih? But every one of you will take something different away from what I've said. This is human being. This is the beauty of human beings. We're not robots. We have subjectivity. We see things in different ways. So when you sit in a book club, you bring your own perspective when you read it carefully. So that's number one. The second thing is when you read book club, when you sit in a book club, it creates this idea of we're doing it together. We're helping each other. Some of you will read faster than others. Some of you will read slower than others. And there are techniques, and I don't know if the book has been mentioned, but there is a book, I haven't got it here, by Mortimer Adler. It's called How to Read a Book. So before you read any book, if you want to start this journey, get that book. It's called How to Read a Book. Very simple title, nothing jazzy, very, very simple. How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. Read that book. It gives you techniques. I don't have time. If I had time, I would have given you some tips from myself. But not every book, you don't have any English ones, I mean, here. Not every book is to be read back to front. So let's just pick this one, for example. I might want to take this one, Anna. Let's see how much it's been used. Not much. Bradford. Okay, mashallah. So can you see what I'm doing already? I'm kind of like just, am I reading the book? Look what I'm doing. I'm looking at the back, the index, what kind of words are going to be in the book. Just scanning the book. I'm just scanning the book. That's all I'm doing. I know it's about Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I'm reading, I'm saying where is it from, printed in Pakistan, how much it's worth. And then I'm looking at the chapter. I'm not reading the book, I'm just scanning it. He's talking about the creation of a state. So you can tell it's a political book. It's got Neo-Arabia, fancy word. It's got geography there. It's talking about international scene, the liberation of Iraq, so conquest there. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of getting these categories in my mind before I'm reading the book. I'm like, okay, oh, this is interesting. About social equality. So I'll just jump to that. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm not reading the entire book. Some books are just to be scanned. You scan through, you find something interesting. Some books you read back to front, like a novel. The point I'm trying to make is every book has its own unique insights, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. So that's something that you learn through that book. Like you don't read a dictionary back to front, do you? You'd be crazy if you did. I'd like to meet someone who does that. But you're not supposed to read a dictionary. It's a reference book. So some books are like that. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that there are ways of reading a book. So don't go home and just start reading every book that's on the shelf. You'll get tired, you'll burn out. There's a strategy. And that book, maybe one day in the future, maybe I'll come and I'll give you some insights of how to do it. I want to end before my time so I can run away. Which is that, all of this might sound like hard work. And it's not. Wallahi, I will just say this to you, it's one of the greatest gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give to a human being, which is that he or she falls in love with knowledge, falls in love with learning. I'm really sorry, and I'm not responsible, but modern education, university education, school education, is the most harmful thing for a child. Children hate school because there's a whole philosophy behind it. They hate history, they hate all these subjects, illa mashallah, because of the way it's taught, because of the way they teach in schools. And I hated school as well. I just played football. I made sure I got home by 3 o'clock or 3:30 and got to madrasa at 4:25 because I need to pray my sabak at 4:30. That was my survival when I was a child. But the point I'm making is that we need to take our children away from these distractions and try and create in them and in ourselves an appreciation for literature, an appreciation for reading. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was an ummi himself. He wasn't educated like us. But Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam left billions, billions of the greatest minds ever that human being has ever witnessed. And their books adore libraries across the world. They've written books that would take maybe 10, 5, 15 lives to write. You need so many lives to write those books. They've written so many books. So much has been produced by the Muslim Ummah. And knowledge is related to power. When you have a knowledge community who seeks knowledge, who learns knowledge, it's directly related to power. I'll just leave with one anecdote. I have literally 1.5 minutes. When I was in America recently, I had the privilege of going to what's called the AAR, American Academy of Religion. It's the largest ever conference on religion. So I go there and I see what the Christians are saying, what the Jews are saying, all the different religions are saying on different, what's the latest research in these subjects. 8 to 10,000 people come to these conferences and they all come to listen to each other. So I listen to what other people are saying. I go there like this, and it's important for Muslims to be there. And you can see that in America, these people are working at the highest level of ilm. They're producing some of the highest quality of knowledge in their religions or in their fields. And that has a direct relationship to power. Like when you have a society or when you have a community of people who are knowledge-based, they're writing. And in America, they take knowledge very seriously. You heard of Ivy League universities? These universities have so much money. They have more money. They have what's called endowments. People basically give their money to them, and they put it into a trust fund. And the money that generates from that, the income that they generate from that, they use it to fund scholarships. They have so much endowment. Some of them are bigger than countries. They have more money than countries. I went to a few of them. I know some of the professors there, and I was like, Islam used to be like this. We used to have awqaf like this, but we used to fund scholarship. And that's directly related to power, because when you have knowledge, you have influence. When you have influence, you can shape the world. And we need to reclaim that, because that's our mantle. That's who we are, and that's who we were. I'll stop there. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, nashhadu la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa atubu. See, my point is done. I'm very strict in my timing, but that's all I'm saying. That if you read ilm, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ask us to make dua for in the Quran? وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي ilma. What does Allah say? Increase me in knowledge. Imam Ghazali, when he brings his 40 volumes of the Ihya Ulumuddin, what's the first book? Kitabul Ilm. Many of the muhaddithin, what do they begin with? Ilm, iman and ilm, tied together. They understand that any civilization will only flourish. We will only be able to prevent further catastrophes, or one of the ways is that when we become knowledge producers. At the moment, we're consumers, aren't we? We don't invent anything on social media. We don't own anything. We're just consuming everything. We're just consuming cars. We don't make cars. We don't make technology. We don't make anything. At the moment, we are simply consumers. We need to become producers once again. People who control what is being sent out there, what is being shared with people. Why? Because we are the khayru ummah. Ukhrijat linnas. We're the best of people that has been taken out from mankind. We need to reclaim that. Bi'iznillahi ta'ala. And I'm sure, and I have every confidence that one of you, some of you, 2 of you, 5 of you, a dozen of you will do that. Bi'iznillahi ta'ala. May Allah bless you. May Allah preserve you. May Allah give you strength in this life. May Allah ta'ala protect all of you and increase you all in knowledge. Allah give you children, grandchildren who will become ulama, who will become fuqaha, who will become some of the greatest minds that will change the world, leave a legacy behind, who will honor the tradition, the legacy of my Nabi and your Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who will spread justice on this earth, because that's what the world needs right now, who will spread peace, equality, which is what Islam did. I could give you a whole history lesson. I think I did it once before, Maulana. I gave you a whole history lesson on why Sunnism, our legacy, whether it's the Ottoman Empire or the Mughal Empire, are good examples of how to run the world today. That's another time. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, nashhadu la ilaha illa anta.